Why do you get to decide how we use our body? Why don't we have that right?
You don't dance. Women with good character don't do these things.
I'm sure people were mad the second that I was born a girl.
Most of it has been riddled with people not understanding South Asian culture and myself. For example, my name is Natasha Chandel. For the longest time, I only auditioned for Hispanic roles. I was in New York. I only auditioned for Puerto Rican roles. My agents would call and say, she's purely Indian, and they would not see me because they didn't know Indians that looked like me, which was weird. I was like, what? In terms of, when I have been booked, I've been called several times to say, are you actually Indian? You're sure you're Indian? You sure there's no mix in it? I'm like, hey, listen, buddy, told you once, think I know my background. But it was another reason I also created a show like my web series, Mumbai Chopra, where it was, the materialistic daughter of a spiritual guru. She was, this was created 10 years ago, and she was a very funny, sexy, ditzy kind of lead, because I said nobody ever talks about, Indians in media are always portrayed as sort of the nerd, the conservative background, the doctor, the lawyer, all of that. But why were we never seen as just funny and silly and like a regular American girl would be in college?
But I definitely was one of five, initially, the first time I competed, I was one of 2 girls that competed that were Indian or South Asian. And then as the years progressed, maybe one of 5 girls out of the hundreds that compete. So, and even at Miss USA, I was the only South Asian contestant. So, there is that lack of representation, but I think that also kind of goes down to that it's because of the parenting and the culture as well. I do think there is this idea in our culture that if you do things in the line of entertainment, media, pageants, modeling, it's not looked upon as highly as another stereotypical career, like doctor, lawyer, whatever. And parents in general, dissuade their kids from going down that route.
Especially the work or the art that I do, it's gotten much more progressively provocative in recent years. And I think the backlash comes from the fact that they don't expect South Asian plus any type of provocative kind of content to go hand in hand. So I think that is a major source of backlash from my own community as well. I know we've been kind of focusing on how others perceive us, but this is a situation where the community itself perceives me in particular, or people who do media work like me, as negative representatives. So I think it's a situation where the outside world is actually more supportive towards my content for the time being than the actual community itself. The actual community itself for me has a very small sect that is actually supportive. But when it comes to my traditional media work, like the documentaries I've made or like the Bollywood music videos that I've directed, that has an overall really great reception. And I think people, especially in our community and outside communities, are really thrilled to see a young woman of color in positions of power. So I've had a relatively good experience in that regard. But definitely it falls in line with both Chhavi and Natasha, where, I've had a slew of situations where people didn't really understand the background or how to connect to it, and they forget that you are also American or Western in any sense. It's like they only treat you as that brown person, and that's where I think it starts to get a little bit messy.
I cried like a baby when Kamala Harris was elected, inaugurated, all of them, all of the milestones. It means so much because I mean, one thing I said is let's just honor our moms for a second, you know, where our moms came as immigrants and they were probably made fun of for their names and wearing bindis and the clothes and all of these things. So then when I heard Kamala Harris in her election, the post-winning speech, she said her mom's name on this international platform. And it made me cry because I was just like, wow, like that's vindication. So never say our name wrong again, because now you have somebody up there who is representing us. I think that's why it means so much to the Black community, to Black women, and especially as, you know, Desi women, just knowing the history of what the people before us have gone through.
Well, I think, you know, it kind of goes back to the point I was trying to make earlier, right? When you can see someone who resembles you in a position like that, it really inspires an entire generation. And I'm just so excited to see all the lights that, you know, Kamala's win has lit in like girls who are of color, who now feel like that is something that they can achieve and attain for themselves. And hopefully by the time, you know, we have kids and we have grandkids, this is not something that's unusual. This is something that's common. And speaking from my experience, you know, I am an immigrant. I was born in India. I came here. I have dealt with things like not knowing if I belong. That's why Miss USA was such a big deal for me, because that was the first time I could kind of see myself belonging and feel like, no, I am just as American. I belong here. I'm a face of the many different faces that American can look like. And this is just another, this is a bigger platform, like having a vice president who is representing women. She's representing South Asians. She's representing people in the Black community. It's remarkable.
Right. I think it's highly indicative of change that we've all been pushing for. And I was just going to say that I'm actually very excited to see how this reflects in policies as well, that benefit people of color or immigrants, for example. I think that's something to absolutely look forward to, because when we were all growing up, I believe our families had a much harder time, as you both have touched on. And I believe I would like to see retrainings, for example, of security, so that people with turbans aren't asked to remove them, or so that people with hijabs aren't screened as often, or randomly selected at airports. I would like to see all of these minor changes actually go into place. So I think her win represents a lot more than just seeing representation. It represents actual legitimate changes in policy and how this nation behaves towards immigrants and people of color. And especially, I hope to see it reflect positively and hopefully a decline in xenophobia as well. I don't think I would be able to just begin and start listing from birth to now how many instances there have been, especially in the South Asian community. American community aside, just focusing on my own people for a second. I'm sure people were mad the second that I was born a girl. So it starts that early. It starts when you're born a woman, it's automatically a problem. There's issues where there's commentary passed on, marriage. There's issues around the field that I've chosen, around the content that I post, around my ownership of my own body. So it's a very broad issue, I believe. And if you ask me, it plagues me every single day, where I'm out there, I'm doing things that people probably wouldn't want their daughter or their niece or, granddaughter doing. And it's worse for us South Asians because of the traditional issues that come along with it, because of the long history of the oppression towards females in our culture.
And it's been doubly hard because I've been an Indian female. If my brother came with any of these things, it would never matter. My brother took 10 years after he was married to think of having a kid, and that was fine. Me, it's been the talk since I was 18, and I've been single. I'm like, what are you talking about? Don't you want me to be with, like, what? This concept doesn't even make sense. It's like my whole life has been planned around me birthing children. So and again, being in entertainment, exactly what you guys said, it's been frowned upon. I was a dancer for many years, and my dad in the beginning used to say that I was, like straight up. Now he's very different, but back then he used to be like, you're a slut in a sense for doing that. You don't dance. Women with good character don't do these things. And it was a constant fight to say, I want to do these things because I have a need, a passion for it. This is what makes me happy. And on top of the voices from outside of the world, it's been doubly hard to fight the voices from inside our world, to go to every wedding and literally be like, I don't want this thing that you want. I don't know what to tell you. There's no trauma behind it. I just don't want it, So it's like, it's been very, very difficult to be a brown female with a different point of view, which is another reason, like when I do the podcast, a lot of people, I have a dating podcast and I'm very sex forward on it, which just means that I don't have any weird stigmas around sex. I don't want to have sex with everybody, but I'm just saying I don't have a stigma around it. And I talk about it very openly. And Indian girls message me all the time going, oh my God, this is me. You're just actually saying it out loud. I'm like, yeah, I know. But it sucks that other women can't feel like they can't say that. They can't say that we want to do the same things that guys do.
I can only go back, right, and see the types of environment my mom and my grandmothers are born in. So like for my grandmother, my great-grandmother, these women were child brides. They didn't even get a chance to finish their education. Fortunately, by the time, it was my mom's generation, these women had a chance to be college educated. But even though they're educated, the expectations at their in-laws was that these women are still going to be the primary home, completely take care of the home. Like, you can work outside if you want to, you can be educated if you want to, but you're still going to be cooking every night, cooking lunch and dinner fresh for my son, for my grandkids, and take care of that and have double the responsibility. And I do think that now, hopefully, things are starting to change in terms of that. But yeah, there are certain, when we talk about how the culture has failed women, you hear these instances of gang rapes that happen. You hear how some people are blaming the girl for being out late, not the men who are committing that crime. So that, and also if you see just the general attitude towards sexuality, a man can go around and have fun all he wants, but when it comes time to get married, if the girl is unpure, that's not okay. She's that whole idea of sexuality, menstruation, all these things that are such a normal part of being a woman, why are they associated with impurity? And that main concept, how that manifests in society in different ways, it has always been something that has boggled my mind. Why is our body impure because of these things? Why do you get to decide how we use our body? Why don't we have that right? Being in the pageant sphere, people are ruthless. I don't know, it's they completely dehumanize us, and they're you will blatantly see things oh, she's ugly. She's not as pretty as her. She's the prettiest one in the group. She's fat. People are constantly picking at your body. It's obviously amplified by a lot when you have a pageant background, but this is something women face every single day. I posted a few TikToks that went viral, and I started noticing the initial comments, when your followers comment, they're pretty sweet. As soon as something starts gaining momentum, you start seeing all these people just being cruel. And for what? Just being mean and nasty. And
I think that both of these instances, right? Like initially, this is so interesting because I'm doing a talk on this and I speak exactly about this. You know, there's that saying in Hindi, kuch to log kahenge. People are going to say something or the other. And it hurts in the moment, but I think I've gotten to a point, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, where it doesn't even affect me anymore. Because half the time, right, people who are saying this, they're not happy people. I do not think anyone who is genuinely happy and fulfilled in their life will take the time out of their day to say something bad to someone regarding their appearance or their content. Like, chances are, I mean, I don't like everything I see online, but it never really occurs to me to actually leave a hateful comment. It's just like, okay, I don't like it, keep scrolling. But to bring someone down on purpose, that person is not doing well in the life and in the space they've created for themselves. And that frustration is being channeled through this way. And the fact that, you know, when you're anonymous online, you have a cover, it just makes them even more shameless when it comes to talking and saying these things.
So the idea is it's hard for us to control the world around us, but how can we start building a tool set of how to at least respond to the world that is increasingly volatile and increasingly, I don't know how, the analogy of just somebody fucking poking at you all the time, like that's kind of what the world is doing and through social media. And I think being a woman on top of it makes it harder because every single thing you do, you get scrutinized. I think every woman on this panel is extremely intelligent and come from great backgrounds. Even if you didn't, you're fucking awesome. But the point is, if you posted a video on social media that somebody perceived as being stupid, they're gonna go, some dude is gonna go, oh, you fucking hoe. Oh, you know what I mean? Like they start, and that's an added thing. They don't say that to a guy. A guy can post a dance video and nobody will give a shit. They'll go, oh yeah, your shirt looks cool, dude. But a girl does, a sexy looking dance video or a sexy, any video, a funny video, anything. And they'll say, you are this, you are dumb, what's the point, blah, blah, blah. That's the added thing that women have to deal with that creates serious mental health issues for us. And it always comes back to boundaries with men. While I totally encourage every guy listening on the show to self-reflect after this and try to be like, hey, am I part of the problem? For the women, I think creating support systems with other women and definitely therapy if you feel like you don't have the tools to set those boundaries with people or to feel better. That could include medication. Please do it because you have one life and you might as well try to be happy through it. And there's absolutely no reason to have to go through the things that you are going through. You can, make things better.
I wanted to bring it back to culture and mental health specifically, because I have a lot to say about how not just South Asian culture, but Asian culture as a whole, and a lot of other immigrant cultures for that matter, teach you from a very young age, from infancy onwards, to suppress your emotions, to kind of keep a blank state at all times, especially negative emotions. Basically, I mean, I don't want to blame my parents or anything because they're relatively progressive in comparison to a lot of other families, which is great. But even in our household, we were kind of taught, even if it was subconscious, just through picking up the actions of our parents, to only portray positive and neutral emotions, and that negative emotions were signs of weakness. And I believe that poses a bigger issue as you grow older, and then suddenly you're kind of like this blank wall with no ability to communicate any of your issues. So it's just funny. I just remember, like, as a student, when I was like a little kid, you know how teachers used to write on your report card, like what your like issues or anything like that were, or things to work on? Mine would always be can't communicate when they have a problem. And I'm sure that's the same for a lot of other Asians we can't let other people in on like what happens in our minds. So I think it's so important, the way everyone's spoken so far, to seek help if you need it, and especially for immigrant children, first generation children such as yourselves, just finding the help and the resources and people to communicate with, to help you break down the barriers that society has kind of caused you to build up over time. I think that's incredibly important. And there's especially, it's very stressful, and I think worse in the case of females. So I'm like the firstborn female. I'm the oldest kid in my family. And like, I cannot ever break this wall, because when my wall comes down, it will all go down. And this is not right. This is not a good stressor to be putting on to any child, whether I'm older now or whether when I was younger. But I think it's a thing that hopefully I will change with my children and they will change with their children. So I do see a positive outcome eventually. It's more just like, I think our generation, unless we seek the help ourselves, is kind of, we've already been unfortunately influenced by these negative, very, very long traditions of keeping everything muted